Welcome to the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast, hosted by William Wolfe. Our mission is to cultivate courageous and biblical Baptist leadership for the 21st century. We aim to revitalize the Southern Baptist Convention from within, defend it from those who seek its destruction, and serve as a better Baptist voice in the public square.
Welcome to a live episode of the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Executive Director William Wolfe, and I'm joined today by Josh Abbotoy. This is not pre-recorded, folks. We are, in the words of Bill Riley, doing it live. Josh, thanks for being here.
Thanks, William. It's great to join you here.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you on with us. We did a Twitter space last night from my own personal account, but we thought we would come to you live this evening. It's the Friday before the week of the Southern Baptist Convention's annual meeting this year in Indianapolis, Indiana, kicking off with the Pastors Conference on Sunday night and really culminating in the official annual meeting on Tuesday and Wednesday of this year. We got a lot of issues on the plate. And so we're going to take this time to talk about the Center for Baptist Leadership, our mission, our work over the last 3 months since our public launch. It really has only been just about 3 months. Continue to cover some of the issues in the Southern Baptist Convention's annual meeting and talk about our event and really anything else Josh wants to get into.
Well, yeah, William, I mean, there's so much we could dive into. This moment sort of feels like, I think for a lot of Southern Baptists who are very engaged, a little bit like the calm before the storm. It's people have been putting in a lot of work preparing for the upcoming convention. And, now here we are, we're rolling into the weekend. People are starting to make their travel plans up to Indianapolis to what is certain to be a very momentous convention. I mean, I think everybody probably knows and is tracking the law amendment, probably far and away the biggest issue that will be before Southern Baptists to decide in Indianapolis. But there's a number of other ones. And I think this is an interesting time to sort of step back a little bit and take stock of where we are as a convention, and then particularly, within that, what the Center for Baptist Leadership has been doing, what is it seeing, and what is its role at the convention? How do you view what is the function for an organization like CBL at this big denominational meeting? So maybe like I'll flip the interviewer's seat a little bit, and I guess I'll start off by just asking you, as part of our read-in, we hear about CBL's mission, reinvigorating the Southern Baptist Convention from within, but then also defending it from external enemies. So what do you think CBL's role is at the convention itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me talk about our mission for a second, because I love it. Our general mission is to cultivate uncompromising and courageous biblical Baptist leadership for the 21st century. As you and I have both been watching what's been going on with the Southern Baptist Convention over the last decade or so, we realize that at the root of a lot of these issues we're fighting over, whether it's critical race theory, whether it's DEI-driven appointments by presidents, whether it's the proliferation of LGBTQ compromise in our seminaries or taught by professors or published elsewhere, whatever it is, the encroaching of worldly ideologies and the compromise, really kind of have one feature in common, and that is a failure of leadership. It's a failure of men in various positions across the Southern Baptist Convention to hold the line on what we believe. It's a failure of men who have bought into a winsome third way model, a Keller model, a TGC model of approaching the world, in which we want to downplay our commitments and downplay our Christian beliefs in an increasingly secular and hostile age in hopes of winning an audience. It really dovetails into the seeker sensitive movement that we've seen in many churches across evangelicalism. And what we believe at the Center for Baptist Leadership, what you guys believe at American Reformer, is that now is not a day and age for compromise, but for courage, for clarity, and for boldness. Now is a time for us to stand on the word of God, to defend our historic Baptist commitments. And if the world doesn't like that, so be it. If the world is watching, I pray that we'll be salt and light. I pray that we'll be offensive to the watching world when we defend, natural marriage, when we defend the natural family, when we defend male-only pastors in our churches. Let the world watch that. I pray that the Lord uses it to convict them and to bring them to repentance and faith. But if not, then we're doing our job. We're being faithful. And so that's sort of the underlying mission of the Center for Baptist Leadership. And then the way we've sort of broken out that mission into three main lines of effort is, first, we want to revitalize the Southern Baptist Convention from within. We want to deal with the in-house issues, the places where Southern Baptists are slipping, whether on their doctrinal or theological commitments, or even on just sort of best practices like financial transparency from entities. The Southern Baptist Convention operates off of tithe dollars from faithful Southern Baptist givers across 46,000 churches. Why can't those churches have greater insight into how that money is being managed at the highest levels at our biggest entities? Why does Planned Parenthood provide more financial transparency to its donors than the Southern Baptist Convention entities provides to theirs, which again are the churches of the convention? So whether it's doctrinal issues like male-only pastors, best practices issues of honesty and transparency with financial issues, and more, we want to revitalize the Southern Baptist Convention so it stays strong, that it's functioning the way that it should, that it's on mission, that we have organizations and entities that represent our interests as Southern Baptists and don't work against them. That's the first line of effort. When we talk about defending the Southern Baptist Convention from those who seek its destruction, I like that because it kind of makes people, raise their eyebrows. What do you mean by that? Well, I think it's been very obvious, particularly with how the abuse reform efforts have been played out over the last many years, that there are those who want to see the Southern Baptist Convention completely destroyed. They've said that in their very own words. They hope to see it burnt down, salt the earth, whatever it takes. If we have to jump on a grenade, those are words, and that's language that's been used by some in the abuse, quote unquote, reform crowd of things. But then on top of that, we have subversive actors who have been a part of our convention. People have gone out from us, Beth Moore, Russell Moore, and others, who then turn around and keep raining fire back in on the Southern Baptist Convention. And when I say destroy us, I mean, they want us to move off of our biblical beliefs. They don't want us to be complementarian. They don't want us to be unapologetically culturally conservative. They want us to be something that somehow appeals to blue America, as if we're ever going to do that when we stand on God's word. And then on top of that, we've seen, particularly through the reporting of Megan Basham and others, this massive influx of progressive money that's been coming into the Southern Baptist Convention. And so if you think of the SBC sort of as a fortress, we need to equip the watchmen on the walls to better spot the threats as they're trying to get in and keep that door closed from people who have no business coming in and being among us. And then that third and final effort is to be a better Baptist voice in the public square. We don't think Baptists are particularly represented well by the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, to say the least, in terms of their public advocacy. They recently launched a video saying that they view themselves as missionaries in the public square to bring hope to the world. That's not really their mission. That's not why they were founded. They're supposed to be defending Baptist interests in government and advancing shared beliefs of ours, like defending marriage, defending family, defending life. And instead, we see them doing things like working to kill bills of equal protection for the unborn in states like Louisiana. So the ERLC, they signed their name to a letter that helped kill the chance to protect unborn, preborn American citizens, precious babies made in the image of God in the state of Louisiana. And that's just unacceptable. And so we want to be a better Baptist voice in the public square. That's our general mission. And then, maybe we can get back into how it applies to the convention, but I'll turn it back over to you for a minute.
Yeah, well, no, that helps because that sort of sets it all up. I mean, the CBL's sort of performing a function that I'm not really aware of anybody else doing, which is essentially it's like a think tank that is tracking issues in the convention all around the year. But of course, the convention is the flashpoint where those issues get decided. And what makes it a little bit different, I think, than other organizations is CBL is independent of any sort of institution in Southern Baptist life. It's really intended to be a voice for faithful pastors and for laity, faithful laity out there, across the country who are faithful Southern Baptists, and they want to be equipped and educated on the issues that they're going to be voting on when they come to the convention. One of the Southern Baptists are not like Presbyterians. We're not some hierarchical denomination. We truly believe we're like a republic, a representative republic where we all get together, and it's like really hard and difficult because there's 12,000 of us, or thereabouts at a given convention, but we all get together and run a meeting that's based on Robert's Rules of Order with 12,000 people in attendance. It's a wild, rambunctious show. And then, a lot of the people who come are busy professionals, or they're very busy pastors who don't have the time and energy to track these issues all year. And so having a trusted sort of independent source to be telling them, hey, here's the issues that we're going to be deciding on, I think it's really filling a role that's not otherwise filled. And, somebody might ask, well, why don't you just trust, the people on the platform to perform that function? They will educate the messengers on how to vote, right? And I think that, let's just be, we don't have to be cynical. I'm not cynical. We don't have to be conspiratorial, but this is a very basic good governance point. Messengers, they are the ones who represent churches who pay and cover the entire budget of this convention. And everybody on stage is acting as an agent of the messengers. And so, they are getting their money from the messengers. They are, when they act in any way, it's supposed to be a furtherance of the will of the messengers. The executive committee is an ad interim committee. It's supposed to be exercising the directions that the messengers give it throughout the year, because the convention, of course, cannot meet all year. So the convention meets, it gives general guidance, and then the executive committee is tasked with carrying that guidance out throughout the year until the next meeting of the convention. So when these people who are supposed to be acting as agents of the messengers are on the stage themselves being the ones who educate the messengers, there's a bit of a conflict of interest in that. It's really in the interest of good government and aligning incentives properly for there to be independent centers, think tanks that equip and educate messengers in their role, which is partially to help keep the agents accountable to executing on the mission.
Point, the Center for Baptist Leadership is truly independent of any institution in the Southern Baptist Convention. We are not taking advertising dollars from Southeastern or NAM like other publications are. We're not looking to rent out space on our website for anything like that. I'm not looking for, any, plush platform gig anytime soon. Of course, I think we've got a lot of work to do in the Southern Baptist Convention before we would get to a point like that. And so there's nothing these guys can offer me. There's nothing they can offer you to silence us or to, stop us from bringing necessary truths and potentially criticisms to bear on issues that we're facing, and then to provide solutions. That's one of the things I'm actually really proud of the work that we've produced at Center for Baptist Leadership so far, is that you'd be hard pressed to find us addressing an issue without working to provide a solution. Everybody can curse the darkness, but it's much better to light a match, to light a candle, and to try to show people a better way. And we really believe that. Again, there is man, we can get into some of this, Josh, in terms of the posture of leaders in the Southern Baptist Convention. I saw Matt Hensley with this tweet about, that one person filing all the complaints about airline noise in Australia or something. And of course, he's a platform guy. There's no getting around that. He's part of the Baptist Review. Let's not pretend that he isn't part of that Facebook group that helped launch Bart Barber and Matt Hensley to positions of leadership in the Southern Baptist Convention. And I just find that honestly, like, it's lame. That's maybe the best word I could use, because there's a lot of guys who have had appropriate and honest criticisms and critiques of what's happening in the Southern Baptist Convention. Tom Buck, Mike Stone, Tom Askell, Will McCraney, Rod Barton. I mean, you name it, the list goes on. And over again, these gentlemen have been proven right in the concerns that they're raising. There's no need to make up issues in the SBC. There's plenty to point out. But the problem is that when they're pointed out, the people who do so are kind of, smacked back, and then they're threatened. If you don't retract this critique, you won't get this opportunity. Well, you guys have nothing to offer us. There's nothing you can threaten us with. We're not looking for those opportunities. We want to tell the truth. We want to rally the messengers in the churches of the Southern Baptist Convention to fight for change. And if we can't have an honest conversation about the issues that are facing us, then the Southern Baptist Convention is just going to limp along into obscurity and failure. We need revolutionary, courageous leaders who are willing to address the issues and bring hope that we can change them. I don't want to say hope and change. Maybe we need a little hope and change these days. And so, I love that about the Center for Baptist Leadership. We're change oriented. And again, like you said, we're issue oriented. We're not in any way, shape, or form officially endorsing any candidate for any office this cycle. And we don't anticipate to do that with the Center for Baptist Leadership. We want to address issues. We want to promote the voices that we think are helping provide us a better path forward in the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's so much I want to say there. I'll just double click on a couple things and then we can move on. But, really the spirit, I think, of what CBL is doing and the value that I see it adding is it's trying to instill in laity a sense of ownership over the direction of the Southern Baptist Convention. So it's trying to tell faithful Southern Baptists all over this country, you can be equipped and educated on these issues, and then you can come to the convention and make your voice known. And that, again, it's in the interest of good governance. Oftentimes I hear some friends even say, the current SBC elite class is largely pragmatist, and I think they are trying to be pragmatic, actually. And I think they are making decisions that they think are in their own self-interest. But I would say it's not even really good pragmatism. Like a good pragmatist running a voluntary association knows that the number one thing is being responsive to the members of the association. And so when you have an association where the leadership class starts to become unresponsive to the membership, starts to make perhaps starts to avoid accountability in various ways, like financial transparency or overruling kind of the popular will of the association, that often does not augur well for the future of that voluntary association, right? And so this is why if you go out into the secular world and you just look at associations, they've got all these sort of best practices. Here's how to serve your membership well. And we don't do a lot of that. We don't do enough of it. And so I think part of what CBL is doing is just it's a watchdog and an advocate for the messengers, for the SBC grassroots. It's going to help them take that job seriously. And in turn, that's going to provide accountability to the leaders. And when you provide accountability to the leaders, they get better as leaders, or better people end up seeking out leadership. I was arguing with somebody on X today a little bit about this. I think it was, Dan Darling didn't like the fact that people were looking at the public tweets of members of our credentials committee, and he thought it was, I think he said it was disgusting that somebody would do that. And I thought, no, this is exactly what leaders should expect. When you say, I want to be a leader in the Southern Baptist Convention, I want to sit on a committee that decides who gets to be a church in friendly cooperation, who gets to vote at our meetings. When you make that step, you are welcoming accountability for your public record. I mean, this is such a pivotal point. Like, and we don't want people seeking out leadership in the SBC who don't like that kind of accountability. Quite the opposite. We actually want people who are ready to forthrightly defend their public record and who will even welcome the scrutiny. And so I thought, that little argument, I mean, of course, those are a dime a dozen. We have those all the time. But I thought it was telling of, I think a much broader problem in the mindset that many SBC leaders currently have. And so, really, really appreciate just the change mentality that CBL is bringing to the table. I'll note one last quick thing, which is just that CBL is elevating a lot of great new voices, really smart, faithful guys who don't get platformed anywhere else. And part of the reason they don't get platformed anywhere else is because they're not company men. They're faithful local pastors who are educated on some particular issue, and they have something important to say to the whole convention. And CBL is a platform for that. I mean, I could just go down the list, pastor after pastor, that they're finally getting a platform, and it's a big one. CBL's grown very quickly. It's really getting the word out there. And I think all Southern Baptists should be grateful for that.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I mean, along with, local pastors, we're publishing lay members, and we're unapologetically, sort of in some ways like this combination of lay members and institutional leaders and pastors, an effort, right? And the idea that lay members, shouldn't have a say in the Southern Baptist Convention, or you have to be a pastor to have a say in the direction of the Southern Baptist Convention, is quite frankly pretty un-Baptist, right? That's a Presbyterian critique of the state of play here. And one of the things I've loved that we've done at the Center for Baptist Leadership is publish great responses, thoughtful, smart, historically accurate, theologically sound responses from lay members. I mean, I think back to Jared Bell's piece, 5 Reasons to Vote for the Law Amendment, in which he just takes apart Rob Collingsworth's argument at the Baptist Review, 5 Reasons to Oppose the Law Amendment. And Jared is, I can't even remember what he does, but he's just a lay member, but he's a really smart guy. He knows his Baptist ecclesiology. He knows his Baptist theology, and the guy can write. And that's been a fantastic piece for us. Another guy, Reed Bishop, he's like a data scientist or something like that, or some logistics manager in Georgia, lay member at a Baptist church, wrote an excellent response to Ken Hemphill. Ken Hemphill is a guy who served as the president of Southwestern. And I think Reed's argument is more faithful than Ken Hemphill's was. I mean, we can have these disagreements, we can have these debates, and we should welcome them. And another thing too there, Josh, and just sort of the culture is really like every other institution and area of life in America today that has become increasingly effeminized, so has the Southern Baptist Convention. There's just not a lot of stomach for masculine discourse, for manly debate, for a public, charge and response on these issues. And I think we need to get back to that. I mean, that's certainly what our Baptist forefathers did, and Spurgeon was not one to shy away from a masculine and manly debate in the public square. And for some reason now we've adopted this model where if you hold any sort of position in the Southern Baptist Convention, somehow you're above critique, or that position means that you have no responsibility to respond to issues being raised by lay members. Again, we can think of things we've seen at annual meetings over the last many years now, where lay members, pastors, or messengers who aren't pastors are engaging with entity heads who are up on the platform, and the entity heads are just so dismissive of their concerns. I was watching the clip between Brian Gunter, I believe is the guy's name, in Louisiana, and Leatherwood, about Leatherwood's position on abortion. And Leatherwood's response was just so sanctimonious and unserious. And Brian Gunter is just this salt of the earth, faithful pastor. And, we need to be able to have a leadership class that can have honest and frank conversations with the people in the pews, with the pastors in the pulpits. I don't know what it'll look like to ultimately recultivate that in the Southern Baptist Convention, particularly with all the pressure from the world that leads us towards this soft, safe, androgynous, effeminate mode of discourse. But maybe if we set the example, others will follow. That's why I love guys like Nate Schloman and Steve Gentry at the Village Church. I think they're a great model of that more masculine discourse, honestly calling out problems. That doesn't mean we need to slander people or lie about people. Of course not. But we should be able to have a frank discussion about real issues. And I think that's what Center for Baptist Leadership has been cultivating in the conversation around the Southern Baptist Convention. And we certainly hope to keep doing that.
Absolutely. And I think it's fair to say it's already significantly shaped the discourse in the whole convention. And one of the, as I look at some of the impacts CBL's had already, it's also a platform where people who are starting to have questions or criticisms of the current leadership class can go and talk about that freely. So I look at a faithful pastor and brother like Willie Rice, who, has grown to have some deep concerns about the direction of the convention. CBL is the place where he can come, and it's really one of the only places where he could go with that kind of content. Similarly, recently with Stephen Feinstein, another a faithful pastor and seminary professor, he can come to CBL and lay out a narrative that really most other outlets aren't interested in pushing. And I think part of what's done here is it's a platform for courage, and courage is contagious. I think that you're just seeing a number of people kind of waking up and saying, we need to stop just standing behind a shield wall mindlessly with existing institutional leadership. And sometimes the stakes really do become such that, for a moment, we're going to step out of the institutionalist mindset, and we are going to join the voices of those outside the institutions who are raising an alarm and saying, like, hey, you've got to change the direction. And, really what I see critical mass and momentum developing behind that vision with CBL. And I think that's really good to see. And it's a necessary path to the long-term health of the convention, which again is it's humble entity workers who are responsive to messengers. So just wonderful to see that all around. I think we should probably turn a little bit more to the convention itself now. I know one of the things that's been keeping you busy is playing event coordinator for this event that we thought, originally it was going to be, kind of a modest affair, and it's kind of grown very rapidly. And we, tell us a little bit about this event, what the interest levels are like right now, and then just how you designed, who's going to talk there, what are we talking about, what are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah, thanks for teeing that up. And before I get into that, and because I want to make sure not to forget to make this point for whoever listens to this or is listening in, we at Center for Baptist Leadership, myself, you other guys, we recognize other people have been doing this work before. I want to make that really clear, that there have been a lot of guys fighting before us, right? Tom Askell, Founders Ministry, Conservative Baptist Network, Mike Stone, and others, a lot of good guys, Scott Coulter, Brad Jerkovich, Rod Martin, Tom Buck, lots of brothers fighting for reform in the Southern Baptist Convention. But I think as we came out of New Orleans in particular last year, and really with the advent of a major issue focus, the law amendment, that's where you and I were like, hey, let's bring some reinforcements to the fight. Let's bring something that is going to function a little bit more like a think tank as opposed to a network, which I think you need both, right? You need the network, you need the fellowship, you need the friends, you need avenues for the dissemination of information, but you also need something that's just kind of constantly producing the content on the issues that matter. And so we view ourselves as reinforcements in been a fight for the future of the Southern Baptist Convention that's been going on. Some of the things that we've been doing, we've say like, well, this story's never been told before. And look, that maybe to some people, it's like, well, hey, I've been saying that story. And maybe that's true in bits and pieces here and there, but we're trying to kind of synthesize and bring a repackaged or behind the scenes exclusive interview like the one we did with John Whitehead. John hadn't told that full story publicly before. So any of our allies shouldn't take that as us trying to signal like we're the only ones in this fight. That's not true at all. But also, I know that a lot of good brothers have gotten tired. They've been slandered. They've been dragged through the mud. They've been attacked. They've been in the fight for many years. And so it's critical that a new generation and more reinforcements come so that this can continue onward. And so that's sort of a role we see ourselves playing. We're not the first to the battle lines, and Lord willing, we won't be the last. We're trying to be allies for everybody who wants to see a better Southern Baptist Convention. So on the event side of things, along those lines, I also want to point out that there's another great event happening on Monday afternoon at the SBC that everybody should go to, hosted by the Danbury Institute. It's their Life and Liberty Forum. It's at 12:30 on Monday. They've got a great lineup of speakers. My former boss, President Trump, is bringing a virtual message. That's a big get for the Danbury Institute. I'm very excited for them. I'll be there at that event. Other great people who are partnering with CBL will be there too. So make sure not to miss that Monday afternoon event. Then make sure not to miss a Monday evening event hosted by Christ Overall. It's sort of like a psalm sing, hymn sing, and time for prayer for the law amendment. I think Mike Law will be there. It's going to be after 9 marks at 9. So it's going to be a little later, maybe like 10:30 at an outdoor location. You can find that, I'm sure, if you go to Christ Overall's Twitter feed. I don't have the location off the top of my head, but make sure to go to those two Monday events. And with that, let me get to our event. So on Tuesday afternoon, you always get the prolegomena and then the main point and then my extra thoughts. So on Tuesday afternoon, we're hosting a lunch event with the Center for Baptist Leadership and Founders Ministries, this SBC at a crossroads. As you've mentioned, this is a watershed moment for the Southern Baptist Convention, particularly on the issue of, are we going to let women pastors proliferate in the SBC? Are we going to hold the line on what we say we believe in the Baptist faith and message, what we believe the Bible teaches? And that's not just a New Testament arbitrary command, but that's rooted in creation order, that only men and qualified men are called to be leaders in the household of God, his church, as pastor, elder, overseer. And so as we're looking at the Southern Baptist Convention schedule this year, obviously Danbury is doing their great institute event focusing on life and liberty. But we said, hey, where's a big event for the reform-minded fighters on Southern Baptist specific issues? And so we tried to step up and fill that need. And in particular, really a piece that's driving this is Megan Basham's new book. Everybody's heard me talk about it a lot. That's great. You need to get the book. You need to read the book, Shepherds for Sale. You need to understand the money and the influence and the agenda that's been brought into all of American evangelicalism over the last decade by major progressive actors, anti-Christian actors. These are folks who are not friendly to the gospel. These are the people who were sort of going head to head with the moral majority. But then about a decade or so ago, a lot of these funders and actors, George Soros not excluded, decided that instead of just trying to go head to head with American Christianity, what if we could co-opt them? What if we could give them some money? What if we could give them a seat at the table? What if we could get them to really have a different posture on political issues, more friendly to the left, more opening, welcome the stranger, AKA have open borders. We need to love our, same-sex attracted brothers and sisters in Christ, AKA we need to compromise on LGBT related issues, compromise on what the Bible calls sin. We need to practice pronoun hospitality. You pick an issue, and behind it is probably an agenda or money that's being driven by organizations that often have some sort of innocuous sounding name, like the Democracy Fund, which is funded by a Buddhist billionaire. People give me grief about that, but it's just an objective fact. Who gave, for example, he gave the ERLC $50,000 of a grant for them to help pull off that MLK 50 conference. That MLK 50 conference was a total disaster. It was just rife with critical race theory and loading white guilt on our good brothers and sisters in Christ and American evangelicalism. It was very lacking on the gospel, was pushing a secular agenda, had all the major actors you could expect to be involved with it. And that was funded. Why would a non-Christian want to help fund an event like that? What do they get out of it? Well, they get out of it moving American evangelicalism more and more to the left. So that's just a matter of record that the ERLC took that money for that event in particular. And so Megan Basham has this book coming out, and unfortunately, it's not going to be released until after the Southern Baptist Convention. But that said, I have an advanced copy. I've been reviewing it. So much of her book deals with the Southern Baptist Convention. And as much as the Southern Baptist Convention is at a crossroads right now, as we've had a failed sort of string of leaders, men either as our president or men in entity positions who are culpable for some of these funded incursions and these agenda-driven incursions, it's really important that messengers in the Southern Baptist Convention really begin to understand what time it is and the threats that are facing us. And so in conversation with Tom Maskell and Megan and yourself, we thought, well, why don't we get Megan to come? I mean, if we can't get the book in the hands of everybody in advance of the Southern Baptist Convention, maybe the next best thing to do would be to have Megan come and talk about some of the material, particularly as it applies to Southern Baptists. So she's our keynote speaker. We're thankful to have her. And then we started building out an event around that. Of course, we want to give an opportunity for two of the best presidential candidates, Dr. David Allen and Dr. Jared Moore, to talk about their vision for the SBC and why it's so important that we elect a conservative president. So we'll have a panel with them, and then they'll be asked some questions by CBL board members, Lewis Richardson, pastor of Woodlawn Baptist Church, longtime, actor in the Conservative Baptist Network, John Whitehead, who's also an ERLC trustee. They'll interview them. We're going to have a panel about politics, uncompromising Christian politics in the negative world, bringing the man who has coined the term the negative world himself, Aaron Wrenn, to have a conversation with Dusty Devers, who's a rising star in the Southern Baptist Convention and in really American, Republican politics. He's now a state senator from Oklahoma, longtime Southern Baptist. And so he will be there. And then also Troy Miller. Troy Miller is a great personal friend of mine. He runs the National Religious Broadcasters Association, huge Christian organization. And Troy is a man who knows what time it is. He's in the fight. He's got all the right instincts. He's got a great, unique perspective to bring. And then my good friend, Ryan Heffelbein from the Freedom Center and Liberty University is going to help moderate that panel, doing great work. And Standing for Freedom Center is also having an event at the SBC too. So make sure to keep an eye out for that. And then really we want to close with the opportunity to hear from Mike Law, because that really is the most important pressing issue facing Southern Baptists. Are we going to ratify the law amendment or not? And as we've seen, again, many in the SBC leadership are against the law amendment. So it's not like Mike Law was going to be invited to come talk about the amendment at a NAM luncheon. It was going to be platformed at any major lunch or event where you have significant elite SBC leadership influence, because they don't want this. They stand at odds with the vast majority of conservative Southern Baptists and messengers on this issue. As many have pointed out, if we really wanted unity in the SBC, why don't these men side with the messengers in support of the law amendment instead of siding against the messengers in opposition to it? But that's not happening. And so we want to give Mike the chance to talk about it. Of course, Mike is very independent in this effort. The Center for Baptist Leadership supports the law amendment, but it's truly an independent effort led by Mike Law. But we're going to bring him up to the stage along with Heath Lambert and Sam Webb and one other guy. David Schroff from Christ Overall. And we're going to get a brief update on that. And then we're going to pray for him, because this really is, in many ways, it is a spiritual battle. And we want the Lord to intercede in the hearts and the minds of Southern Baptists to lead us to humbly submit to God's word on this. I mean, that's really the question. Michael Clary wrote that up in an article for Center for Baptist Leadership recently, making the point that this isn't a matter of interpretive differences. Dr. Mohler made the same point too. It's a matter of obedience. And really, it's a matter of humbly accepting God's good creation order design for men and women in the church. So Michael does a great job sort of tracing the roles of men and women in the church and in the home back to the Garden of Eden, and counting for the fall and then the renewal in the church. And so we're arguing that this is a matter of submission to God's creation order, a humble obedience to it, or a rebellious rejection of it. And so it's a critical theological and spiritual issue. We're going to get a chance to hear from Mike Law. We're going to pass out flyers that'll help inform, all the messengers on what to do with this amendment, which quite frankly is pretty simple. Don't let it be amended, and ratify the amendment. We'll close with that time of update and prayer, and then get back out there into the convention and hopefully, Lord willing, see the successful ratification of law's amendment.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think as I just look at the who you have on stage, one of the things I'm struck by is just the breadth of the people that are kind of rallying around the project together. This is not just Calvinists or just Arminians. It's not, it's really a broad movement that are buying into this, and I think that's really exciting to see. And then, particularly, I think that's the case with the law amendment. I think a lot of people from different villages within the Southern Baptist countryside are really coming together to support the law amendment. It's clearly just an application of the plain teaching of Scripture. It's right there in the Baptist faith and message, and it's really uniting a lot of people. And it's wonderful to see. This is what we are at our best. Like we are a big tent defined in the right way, which is we do tolerate a lot of difference in the convention, but we stand pretty squarely on some bright lines that come from Scripture and that really define who we are as a people, right? Like, we're Baptists. We don't baptize babies. We believe in credo baptism. We believe in congregational governance. These very basic things that set us apart from other types of Christians who are Christian brothers, but just, they have a different way of doing church. Well, we got a Baptist way of doing it. But there's certain ways in which you can enlarge a tent that will destroy the tent. And, that's what we're really seeing a lot of unity develop around. And that's wonderful to see. And it strikes me, as that event, I think it's starting to approach almost it's over 800 people and attendees. We might be at 1,000 attendees by the time next week rolls around. And what an opportunity, for the people in that room. Again, we want every messenger to take some ownership. And so, the 1,000 people in that room, or people listening to this broadcast right now, you can take a Bible and go and, with a smile on your face, talk to your fellow messengers at the convention and tell them why they should vote for the law amendment. And that those 1,000 people at that meeting, they're going to hear directly from Mike Law. We're going to pray together, and they too can be charged to go out and do the same. Go talk to people. Go talk to your fellow messengers with a smile on your face and a Bible in your hand. And I'm feeling confident and hopeful that we will pass this amendment, despite a lot of big names in the convention opposing it, and despite a lot of the mainstream media opposing it and using scare tactics about it. I think it's going to pass, and that's going to be really meaningful. It's going to really, I hope and pray that that's something that God uses to preserve the convention for years going forward. Faithfulness, there's no one-stop silver bullet for faithfulness. It's a perennial activity. My wife is a gardener. I'm not really a gardener, but I watch my wife garden, and she's got to go out regularly every week during the growing season and weed the garden, right? It's not something that you do once and then you can set it and forget it. It's a constant perennial activity. And it's the same for us as Christians in churches. The task of faithfulness is always going out and minding the garden, seeing what weeds are sprouting up, and perennially, continually keeping vigilant and keeping diligent about that work. And so the law amendment, that's the challenge that we have this year. But there's no silver bullet for faithfulness. We have to come back next year, and there's going to be other things. That's how it is in the church. And fortunately, God has called people who have a heart and a ministry to do this kind of thing, to help the church in weeding the garden. And so, my hope and prayer is that we get this passed, and that everybody has a renewed sense of diligence and vigilance about these constant pulls to compromise in our convention. Well, William, unless you have anything else you really wanted to talk about with respect to the event itself, I thought it might be good to turn and just hit on some of the key issues. We've already beaten up the law amendment pretty well. We can talk about some of the other top issues that the convention is going to be deciding in Indianapolis. I know one of the ones that CBL's been tracking a lot of articles written about it, is this call for financial transparency and accountability. And I'll tee this up briefly, and then you can riff here. But it goes back to something we both said earlier on, which is that we do want good governance. We want messengers who are empowered to hold entities accountable. When you look at the Southern Baptist Convention, its practices with respect to financial transparency are sort of like shockingly opaque. I mean, there are so many basic things about our entities that we don't know. And that's a problem for a couple of reasons. One, it makes it hard for the messengers to keep these entities accountable. Two, issues and disasters can develop without being surfaced. And so I think particularly here of the financial situation at Southwestern, there's other situations. There's probably situations that are live right now that we're unaware of because we don't have the information. For example, this funding issue that you've talked about. Yes, sometimes these secular foundations and outside organizations give money to Southern Baptist entities. And you can't find that out from a Southern Baptist entity. The way that people find that out is they're reading the 990 disclosure forms for these random foundations, and then they're surprised because they stumble across in that filing, oh, there was a $100,000 gift to fill in the blank SBC entity. That's the only way that gets discovered right now. So it's actually very likely that there are more grants and donations from lefty organizations than what we are aware of, because we only become aware of, I think we become aware of it because, somebody like a Megan Basham is reading the Form 990 for the Zuckerberg Foundation and happens across an entry. So when you have to disclose, when you have to do 990 level disclosure, those funding sources are surfaced to the messengers, and that's important. I mean, everybody knows this. Where you get your money, money almost never comes without strings, and where you get your money kind of guides you in a particular mission. And so, this is key. It's just basic good governance too. I mean, if you look at any kind of standard, nonprofit good governance practices, all of them, even I'll even say this, even at the level of the local church, there are small church faithful pastors all across this country that fill the convention who, run their churches like proper congregational churches, which means there's some point in the year where they're going to their congregation with a budget. And that budget, among other things, has the salary of the pastor listed right on it there. And he's got to stand up in front of that conversation and say, congregation, please approve this. Like, this is what you're going to pay me to be your pastor this year. And so, when you have guys like that, and then also part of that budget is giving a little bit to the SBC. And when you have guys like that, seeing Southern Baptist entities resisting disclosure, there's some resistance to having salaries public. And I kind of get that. I mean, who wants their salary made public, right? Of course you'd prefer for it not to be, but that comes with the territory, with leading a nonprofit. If you're the president of a university, the whole world knows your salary, unless it's Southern Baptist University or seminary. So it comes with the territory. And here's the other thing, these guys, a lot of these guys are making good money. I mean, like the heads of our seminaries and some of our entities, I don't know, but I would guess they're making over $500,000 a year. And you know what? I mean, I'm a faithful layman. I've been in business. I know that that's probably what they're worth in many cases, not all cases, but a lot of them are worth that. And so, that's fine, but you gotta go and explain it to messengers, right? If you feel bad about it, that's kind of a red flag. Like if you think that it's just and right that you get paid a certain salary because of your leadership in the convention, go justify it to the messengers, let them see it, and explain to them why it's the right thing to do. I mean, I get it. Like, somebody like an Al Mohler, he can make a lot of money a lot of places. He might be underpaid. I don't know what he makes, but he's a valuable guy, right? And I'm sure there's, to some extent, Southern wants to pay him justly because there's a certain amount he could just make if he wanted to go be the head of a big think tank or wanted to get into some other line of work. And that's fine. That's a good reason to pay a high salary. I'm sure a lot of these entity heads are good managers. They're good executives, and they might have opportunities in the private sector. So, okay, that's fine. Let's explain all of that to the messengers, but let us know these numbers.
The salary piece is really just one part of it. It's an important part of it. But as Rhett Burns has continued to make clear, the reason it's so important for Southern Baptist churches to have a sense of what our entity heads are making is because it empowers us to evaluate the trustees in particular, right? So if a seminary's enrollment is cratering over a 5-year period, and at the same time executive compensation is increasing, then something's wrong there. The trustees aren't holding that organization accountable. And that's just one example. And this gets into just the overall sort of posture we have in the SBC right now, this culture of opaqueness and a lack of transparency. I mean, the trustees are supposed to be representing us, and stewarding these institutions in a particular way. They're not there to defend the institutions from the convention. They're there to represent the convention and the convention's interests and commitments and beliefs, and make sure that the institutions and the entities stay aligned with them. And so when, say, bad teaching is being spotted at a seminary, it's not the trustees' jobs to circle the wagon and defend that seminary. They should investigate that. And if there's a report, they should clear things up. They should hold that entity accountable. They shouldn't be defending it from the convention's churches or messengers or students who caught the mission drift, right? And so the Form 990 provides a lot of insight into some of these things and equips the messengers and the churches of the convention to better hold our trustees and our entities accountable. It really is a no-brainer. And so Rhett Burns has been leading the fight on this. He made the motion last year to amend the SBC business and financial plan. And again, to be very clear, not to require them to publish this information publicly or to file it with the federal government, but to compile it and have it in a published form that can then be made available to Southern Baptist churches. And it's a no-brainer. And yet again, we're seeing this massive space between what I think the vast majority of Southern Baptists find to be a reasonable ask and what our entity heads support or oppose. And the entity heads have been pretty quiet on this, but one, Paul Chitwood at the IMB has publicly opposed it. And he wrongly said that this would threaten IMB missionaries when it absolutely wouldn't. And little pieces of fear-mongering rhetoric like that, whether intentional or not, let's have the best assumptions here. Let's assume Paul Chitwood is misinformed. He was told that this would threaten IMB missionaries when it doesn't. But when you start seeding such fear-mongering rhetoric out into the public, it makes it hard to have a serious conversation about the issue at hand. Rhett Burns has answered that allegation and clarified it at the Center for Baptist Leadership. He published another great piece on it today, sort of giving an update and a state of play. But for the people listening to this and preparing to go to the convention, on behalf of Rhett, I just want to say that his main point here really cannot be missed, and it cannot be overstated. And it's this: the decision on whether or not we're going to have more financial transparency in the Southern Baptist Convention is not a decision for the executive committee to make. It is certainly not a decision for a subcommittee of the executive committee to make, nor for the full committee of the executive committee to make. That is a decision for the messengers representing the churches who constitute the Southern Baptist Convention. And so Rhett's been saying this, and I agree entirely. The executive committee has a choice. They can do the right thing here, or they can do the wrong thing. The right thing is to bring his amendment out for a vote, put it on the floor of the convention, and allow the messengers to have an up or down say on it. Allow a debate. Maybe there needs to be an amendment to his amendment. That, again, is not a decision for the executive committee to make. And so right now, as we're heading into to Indianapolis, Rhett's been working this for a year, and the executive committee hasn't made a decision yet. They are going to have a meeting on Monday. The subcommittee will have a meeting, and then the full committee will have a meeting, and they will adjudicate and dispense with this amendment. And so Rhett has sort of sketched out for people the possible scenarios and how messengers need to be prepared to respond. Again, this is just such a great value add for Center for Baptist Leadership, in terms of helping equip messengers. And so what Rhett is saying is that, in scenario 1 or 2, where the subcommittee on financial information, kills it, or it makes it to the executive committee, full committee, and then they kill it, messengers need to be ready for Rhett to make this motion again. And when Rhett makes the motion again, and it will most likely be referred to the executive committee yet again, Rhett and others are going to challenge the ruling of the chair on that referral, which is within their right to do so under Robert's Rules of Order. They can challenge that ruling to refer it, and then that to overturn the ruling of the chair will require a 2/3 majority vote. And then if we win that, we get on to the motion, the amendment itself to the Southern Baptist Convention's business and financial plans, which then requires just a majority to pass. I am so confident that if this was put before the messengers, it would pass. Then what does that tell you then? Why would our bureaucracy be stonewalling an effort that the majority of the messengers would support? Are they really so much smarter than us? Do they really know so much better than we do, as the messengers, on what financial transparency we would like to see from our entities that we fund? Of course not. They should be serving on behalf of the convention. And really their only question here is this motion, is this amendment in order to be debated and voted on? And that answer is abundantly clear. Of course it is. If we as Southern Baptists can't amend our business and financial plan, then what does it even mean for us to be this governing body, the messengers for our convention? This is something that is entirely within our right to vote on. So the executive committee has a responsibility to Southern Baptists to give us an opportunity to vote on this, and the messengers have a right to vote on it. And don't be confused or bogged down by this wording of it, the 990 amendment. I've really just started pivoting towards calling it the Financial Transparency Amendment. It's Rhett Burns' Financial Transparency Amendment to make this information available to Southern Baptist churches upon request. And Rhett did make a genuine good faith effort to get some of this information from the entities during this last year as he's been advocating for it. And he got varying responses from the different entities when he pursued it. And the place where he got stonewalled the most on getting this information was from the IMB and NAM. Now, if you're listening to this and you're a trustee at IMB and NAM, I just hope that's a red flag for you. I would hope that you would want to help steward that institution in such a way that this information would be readily made available to the churches. And another point on this too, Josh, is that, again, I think that we need to recover an understanding of the convention operating as a group, a cooperative group of churches. Like you said, in a church, this information, these financial numbers are made available to the members of that congregation. Well, if you extrapolate that out, the members of the Southern Baptist Convention are our churches. We have a right to know what essentially our employees, the entity heads are our employees. We're employing them. We have a right to know, what they're being paid, how they're stewarding the resources that we're giving them to fulfill the Great Commission. What sort of real estate holdings does NAM have? What sort of additional funding streams is NAM getting from the government, from other NGOs and otherwise? I mean, these are questions that a lot of people have. You and I both remember that when we were in Anaheim, the very first motion out of the gate when it came time to take motions from the floor was for a forensic audit on NAM. And that was just completely shot down. And let me say this to Southern Baptist Convention leadership. I mean, this issue's not going away. I mean, you might find a way to stonewall and block Rhett Burns in this motion this year. You might be able to break Robert's Rules of Order and not let us overturn the ruling of the chair, which would be inappropriate, but it's not going away. We're going to keep coming back. Same thing on the law amendment too. These issues are not going away. Conservative Southern Baptists are waking up. They're ready to fight. They want biblical fidelity. They want confessional fidelity. They want financial transparency. And we're just getting started. So why don't you do the right thing this year in Indianapolis and give us a chance to vote on it?
Yeah, 100%. There were efforts in Nashville as well for financial transparency. This has been a long, slow burn issue that's been bubbling up, and the motion in Anaheim passed with pretty heavy approval from the floor, and again was ruled out for procedural reasons. The Rhett Burns motion will survive a challenge under Robert's rules if we can get the requisite votes from the floor. And again, the message to leadership, it's like you are getting a clear signal from your constituents that they are not feeling well served by your current practices. And it's extreme short-term thinking. It will give you some short-term comfort not to have to disclose this information, but in the long term, it's corrosive to trust and to the good governance of the convention. And so, leaders, even if you're pragmatists, I'll make the pragmatic argument to you. Acting in this way will kill the golden goose. You will see drops in tithing and drops in contributions to the cooperative program if you continue to run the convention in this manner. And that's just rock solid. It's a law of nature that can be taken from any other sort of nonprofit organization. So I do hope I hope we get a chance to vote on it. I do hope people are tracking and ready when Rhett makes his motion there in Indianapolis. Okay, so we've talked a lot about financial transparency. Then on the law amendment, I want to flag one other issue before we move on to a couple other things, and we can't say this enough. It is likely that there will be attempts to amend the amendment, and that's a no. That's just a flat out no. That will delay the amendment. A vote to amend is a vote to kill it. So let's just be crystal clear. Just pass it. That's our mantra. Just pass it as it's written. Now is the time. We have all of the future, as long as the Lord gives us, to finesse and perfect the wording in our Constitution. But the need of the day is to speak clearly. I think it was just that yesterday, the Associated Press ran a newswire about what we're going to be deliberating about in Indianapolis. And here's how they characterized it. They said, Southern Baptists are meeting to decide whether they're going to allow women pastors in their convention. Now, of course, that's not really an accurate, in a technical sense, that's maybe not an accurate description of the debate that's happening, right? There's these constitutional niceties. We have a Baptist faith and message that already says the office of pastor is reserved for men. But the AP, maybe while not technically accurate, is, I think, really accurate in the broad scope of what they're seeing. That's what the stakes are of this vote that we're going to be having. I think they perceive correctly that a defeat of the law amendment is opening the door to egalitarian practice in our convention. Those who've been tracking know this well. The Credentials Committee has told us before they do not have sufficient guidance to take action on egalitarian churches. When they have taken action, it's been in a very ad hoc fashion. We know there's a lot of egalitarian churches. We know there's more every year. And we also know that most of the egalitarian churches referred to the Credentials Committee are not acted on. We've had a couple very high-profile cases, and in the meantime, there's a lot of churches that get referred to the committee, and we don't get an answer. Their cases languish. I think one of the reasons Mike Law is doing this at all, he wasn't looking for a fight or anything like that. He became aware that there were egalitarian churches right around his church, Southern Baptist churches with women pastors. And he referred a church back in 2022. That church, still, no decision has been made on that church. 2 years later, with all the water under the bridge, we still don't really know, are they Southern Baptist or not? This is not rocket science. And, it's clear that if the law amendment fails, the Credentials Committee will continue its prior practice of delaying, in many cases, letting these cases sort of rot on the vine, let the passage of time remove the urgency and the need to take action on these churches. These are the stakes. And the other thing is, although I would say it's premature, we know that a lot of faithful conservative churches, if the law amendment fails, are going to say, you know what, we don't want to continue financially contributing to a mission that we don't share. We think it's an error. We think it's against the plain teaching of Scripture to fund church plants that are perpetuating egalitarian practice, and we're out. And as that happens, if that process takes off, then efforts to reform the Southern Baptist Convention to keep it faithful become that much more difficult in the future. So, those are the stakes. I think the law amendment is perfect as written, but even if you don't think it's perfect, do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. The need of the hour is to get that thing across the finish line. Unless you have any other comments there, William, maybe we can turn to a couple other final minor points here.
Yeah, I'll make another comment there, and that is that refusing to draw lines around orthodoxy and doctrine is actually drawing lines against it. So what do I mean by that is that if we refuse to hold the line on this, it actually sends a pretty clear signal. It draws a line between the Southern Baptist Convention and every Southern Baptist church that wants nothing to do with egalitarian compromise. And so by refusing to appropriately enforce a negative prohibition, it actually serves as sort of like a positive rejection of the churches that do hold that faithful position. And so it's really important here. And this is how liberals infiltrate and subvert organizations and denominations. They get a seat at the table. They win the moderates, right? In every denomination, in every organization, you do have conservatives, moderates, and liberals. I know people in the Southern Baptist Convention, they really don't like it if anybody ever calls anyone a liberal. Okay, well, liberals are everywhere. I'm not going to pretend that they're not in the Southern Baptist Convention today. And I'm not going to pretend that just because we won a major fight against theological liberalism 40 years ago, that new forms of liberalism can't have crept into the Southern Baptist Convention today. There's so much evidence that it has. And so in these denominational battles, what really matters is that you have to convince the moderates that they have to draw lines, and they really are hesitant to do that, right? So the conservatives are there saying, this is what we believe. Not only is this what we say we believe, but we're going to defend what we believe. And if by defending what we believe, that means that liberal there at the end of the table is actually going to go somewhere else, hey, that's okay. We're supposed to agree on these things to all be together here, cooperating, on support of the Great Commission, et cetera. And so what the liberals try to do is say, no. We do all agree. Moderates, don't we all agree? I agree with those conservatives, actually, but we don't need to draw the lines here. We can all work together. We can leave it open to interpretation. Okay, well, when you do that, then the conservatives are going to realize, well, actually, wait a minute. I'm not confident. We do all agree on this. We do believe on it. And the conservatives will ultimately leave. And then when the liberals have the power, they will introduce their own new positive enforcements, like, well, now you actually have to welcome women pastors, or now you have to be LGBT affirming to be a part of it. That's just sort of like loose general institutional theory, but that's been played out in a variety of Christian denominations. Look at the United Methodists. And so if we can't draw a line here where God draws a line. In fact, it's not really even us drawing a line. We're just saying, hey, the Lord of the universe drew this line in creation order around the church and in the church and through the church. And we're going to defend it and stand. We're going to side with God's word against the world and not side with the world against God's word. And you know what? Everybody who wants to join us on God's side is welcome to do so, but we are not going to compromise here. People like that will end up leaving. They'll go join 1689 confessions. They'll go be non-denominational. They'll just disassociate with the Southern Baptist Convention. Our pragmatic, numerical driven leadership is grossly underestimating how many good and faithful churches will leave the Southern Baptist Convention if we can't get it right on whether or not only qualified men are called to be pastors. In a world that doesn't know what a woman is, we shouldn't be surprised that for some reason the church can't figure out what a pastor is. But unlike the world, we should be able to look to God's word and answer that question. As Southern Baptists, we are a people of the book. We believe in the authority, the inerrancy, and the sufficiency of Scripture. It is our final standard for faith and practice. And what other areas are so important for the practice of the church than who can be a pastor? And so it really is a watershed moment in the Southern Baptist Convention. This really can't be something that we agree to disagree on. As Willie Rice said in my podcast with him, he said, when we leave the Southern Baptist Convention, there's going to be one of two headlines for the person in the pew back there. The first one is Southern Baptists, reaffirm male-only pastors, or the second one is going to be the Southern Baptist Convention leaves the door open to women pastors. And as we know, if we leave that door open, if we can't close that door, the next thing coming through that door is LGBTQ affirmation. And by the time we're fighting that, by the time we're fighting whether or not we're going to have Southern Baptist churches with rainbow flags outside of them, we've lost the denomination at that point. At that point, we're just retreating and cutting our losses. And as Tom Klein wrote for the American Reformer, let's not Machen the SBC. Machen did fight. Machen ended up having to leave. Christianity and liberalism, the struggle between the modernists and the fundamentalists. Machen had to cut his losses and leave his former denomination, leave his former employer, turn over the institution, the assets, the mission to the liberals. We don't want to do that for the Southern Baptist Convention. And if folks can't realize how the issue of egalitarianism is the canary in the coal mine for us right now here in 2024, I don't know what else to tell you. We have literally decades of evidence to point to on this issue. So let's not bury our heads in the sand. Let's look at God's word. Let's look at history. Let's make a smart and humble choice, and let's pass the law amendment.
Absolutely. All right. So let's turn to a couple other things. I mean, we've hit the really big things here. One issue I've been tracking is the ERLC. This is our think tank. This is the entity that is supposed to represent Southern Baptist values in DC. I said this from the convention floor in Anaheim, actually. I said, but too often the ERLC actually turns around and represents DC to Southern Baptists. And someone in Anaheim made a motion to defund the ERLC, which I spoke in support of. It seems very likely something similar will happen this year too. I sort of cracked up the other day. The ERLC put out sort of a puff piece video, just a feel good sort of thing, talking about their work, and they were soundly, brutally ratioed by people from all over the convention, critiquing them for various things. They've made catastrophic choices. Even this morning, part of the manifesto of the shooter at the Covenant School in Nashville was leaked to the press just this morning. And of course, we know that ever since that shooting transpired, Brent Leatherwood has been devoting a lot of his time and some at times ERLC staff time to keeping that manifesto under lock and key. And we know why that is. The manifesto is exactly what people expected. It was a hateful memo written by someone who hated Christians, right? And wanted to perpetuate this idea that Christians hate and demean LGBT people. It's a radical document. We know that it was suppressed in part to stop there from being any blowback against the LGBT community, and this, it's, you could debate about it, you could argue about it, but how is this in any way advancing the interests and concerns of Southern Baptists? But as you look through the rest of the ERLC's activities, you can see similarly catastrophic decisions that they've made with when should we speak, how should we speak, what should we speak to. It looks as an outsider like a personal platform for hobby horse issues, rather than an entity that seriously sits down and says, okay, what can we be doing today to fight to protect our people in the halls of power in DC? And actually in a very odd case of horseshoe theory, although I don't buy into horseshoe theory, but obviously conservatives have long been severely critical of the ERLC and sought to defund it or at least get it back on its mission. I think, Ben Cole and some people on the left are actually similarly suggesting to defund the ERLC. That's interesting. I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. But if I had to make a guess, I would say it's because the ERLC is actually it actually is an easy thing to criticize. It makes such catastrophic choices. I think that it actually bolsters conservative critiques of the current SBC leadership class. But in any event, I expect this motion to be made, and I expect, I'm not sure if it will pass, but I think it will have even more support than it did in Anaheim. Of course, the top line issue is what the ERLC did in Louisiana 2 years ago when they came out and opposed a pro-life bill there. They've supported red flag laws in Tennessee, which again, maybe that's a debatable issue, but I don't think Southern Baptists probably have different views on, how states should regulate guns. I don't think, and probably a lot of them lean towards the pro-gun, pro-freedom side of that debate. Regardless, it's not the sort of thing that we Southern Baptists pay $3 or $4 million a year to the ERLC to do. And so, there's serious mission creep over there. There's serious failure for them to be active on the battles that matter. The Matt Walsh is a Catholic who moved to Nashville a couple years back. He's got a show on the Daily Wire, and it fell to him to be the promulgator of the efforts in Tennessee to protect kids from being trans. This is the ERLC's backyard. I don't, for the life of me, I don't know why the ERLC isn't leading in an effort like that, a slam dunk effort, something that all Southern Baptists would support, that is an outworking of the duty that we all have as Christians to love our neighbors and to seek their good. That's such a straightforward law that should be passed to protect children. And why is the ERLC not at the front lines of an issue like that? We all want to see that sort of leadership. So I don't think that the ERLC will be defunded, but I would say that it's likely the motion will be made. There will be significant support, maybe even a majority. I think they need to hit 2/3 to actually defund the thing. But if that happens, that's a serious signal, and not just to Brent Leatherwood. It's a signal to the trustees. You guys are on the wrong path. And what I hope and pray is actually, some people, good friends, want to defund the ERLC. I actually don't hope that happens. I hope what happens is we get leadership in there that's actually a worthy champion of Southern Baptists, protects their interests, can even speak with a prophetic voice to administrations. I think if Donald Trump wins this fall, it will be in large part because Southern Baptists and a lot of other American evangelicals vote for him. I would really like it if the ERLC had positioned himself such that he was able to at least be in the room, at least be able to have a civil conversation with the President of the United States. We're the biggest Protestant denomination. The Republican Party is the only party that remotely reflects our values in electoral politics. It's absurd that we would position ourselves to where we can't even have a voice in an administration like that. We should be right there. We should be in the room representing Southern Baptists well and prudently if there's going to be a GOP administration. We all know the Democrats will box us out. We know we're not going to have a voice there, but the Republicans will listen, especially if we act with prudence. And so my hope is that whatever vote happens with the ERLC, it's a serious wake-up call to trustees that they need to significantly change the direction of this entity.
That's well said. I guess I would just say fair warning to the last people who tried to exercise some oversight over the ERLC from the Southern Baptist Executive Committee. Russell Moore and his enablers launched probably one of the most vicious, politically motivated, slanderous attack jobs and takedowns that we've seen in recent Southern Baptist history. You have got to listen to our first 2 episodes of the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast with John Whitehead, as he walks you through what really happened when Russell Moore went to leave the Southern Baptist Convention, leave the ERLC, and really burn it all down on the way out. I mean, I kind of hate to give the guy the credit, but you got to give him credit where it's due. I mean, he set out to destroy the executive committee, and him and his cronies and his enablers at the ERLC and his trustees and people who worked with him on that, who refused to hold him accountable, his staff, like people like Philip Bethencourt, who illegally recorded private conversations and then leaked selected portions of the audio. I mean, they did it, man. They got asked to answer a couple of questions about the direction of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. And in response to that, they just went scorched earth. They lied, they slandered, they attacked executive committee members in order to burn it down and get their own people in power. They played a hand in advancing the absolutely false abuse crisis, abuse apocalypse narrative. And John Whitehead was one of the lone trustees who was serving as a voice of reason, a voice of truth, and a voice of accountability during that time. So we're thankful for John telling that story. So I guess I say all that to say, watch out if you try to hold the ERLC accountable. Who knows, they might come after you next. But in all seriousness, I mean, that's ridiculous. We absolutely should be able to hold them accountable. And the reality is Brent Leatherwood is essentially Russell Moore 2.0, and nothing's really changed there at the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. As you have pointed out, Josh, they fundamentally don't represent Southern Baptists on political issues, not fairly, not accurately. If they are missionaries, they are much more missionaries from the world to the Southern Baptist Convention than they are from the Southern Baptist Convention to the world. And you're right. I mean, if Trump wins again, I don't see them having any access or influence in a second Trump administration. It's sort of an open secret in DC that they're one of the worst meetings that you can take on the Hill as a congressional staffer. As somebody who worked 10 years in Washington, DC, who knows what that world looks like and what the advocacy game is supposed to look like, how it's supposed to be played, quite frankly, it's embarrassing. And we're beating a dead horse here in many ways, because the vast majority of Southern Baptists feel the same way. When you hear churches who talk about their frustration with the SBC and with reallocating giving to make sure that nothing goes to the ERLC, I mean, 2 of the main organizations you hear about most are the ERLC and NAM in terms of frustration. But the number one really might be the ERLC. Some people like to say they're doing good work. I don't know what that good work is that they're doing. They're not there on the front lines of the fights that matter most. So again, I'm not surprised that there would be an effort to defund them again. But I agree with you, actually, Josh. I'd rather see them repurposed to be back on the mission that they're supposed to be on. I'd rather see them be led by a politically savvy, accomplished conservative who is a Southern Baptist and actually a conservative and not some sort of like neocon moderate, and that they would be like at the front line of these major political fights in our nation, looking to outlaw pornography, looking to beat back the transgender agenda, looking to fight on behalf of preborn Americans, to fight to pass bills of equal protection at the state level in a post-Roe world, instead of working to end those things. I mean, we can only repeat that so many times, but it's so important to be said. The ERLC worked to kill a bill that had a chance of passing in Louisiana that would have protected the unborn. And they joined in with Pro-Life Inc. to tank it because there were appropriately judicial penalties for mothers who procure abortions. I mean, the fact that they can't bring themselves to say that a mother who kills her child should be held legally, morally accountable for that is crazy, because that's just a fundamental tenet of biblical justice. And Brent Leatherwood has, obfuscated on that point multiple times from the stage at the annual meeting. He continues to do so pretty much at every chance he's confronted with, an opportunity to clarify their position on that. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just one example. It's a major example. And I'm sure we'll see something like that. But at the Center for Baptist Leadership, our goal is actually a Southern Baptist Convention that still has an ERLC, but that ERLC is working on behalf of Southern Baptists, and not sort of working on behalf of some sort of like moderate, watered down progressive Christianity vision of cultural engagement, but actually robustly defends the biblical worldview, biblical beliefs on life, family, marriage, and religious liberty to a secular world.
Yeah. Let's think about some other issues here. I mean, there's always the resolutions that we pass. We have a resolutions committee. I don't know exactly how they do their work, but they always prepare a slate of resolutions. In theory, messengers can submit resolutions for consideration, although I think often the resolutions that come out are ones that are sort of maybe crafted or handpicked by the committee themselves. This year, I would say like there's not a resolution this year that is there's not a resolution 9 or something. The resolution 9 was a resolution about CRT in Birmingham that caused quite a bit of discourse and frankly caused a lot of people to leave when it got passed. I don't think there's anything like that that's going to be nuclear here. There's a couple interesting ones. There's an IVF resolution that I think is actually quite detailed. I'm not sure the Southern Baptist Convention has ever spoken to IVF before, and it has a lot of good information in it. So that one's one to just take note of. Aside from that, there's some ones that you would expect. I believe there's a resolution regarding the October 7th attack in Israel. This is not uncommon that the SBC would pass a resolution on various flashpoints in politics and international wars and such. So there's something along those lines. But any other, there is a resolution celebrating religious liberty that I thought was a little weird because it sort of in one part particularly says, kind of makes a point of, we don't support blasphemy laws. And I kind of had to do a little bit of an eye roll about that one just because it's lots of good Baptists have supported blasphemy laws over the years, and I don't think our Baptist faith and message requires us to go around saying, oh no, people should be free to say, terrible, blasphemous, obscene things in public. That's even America's history, and a lot of Baptist fathers have never believed that. But that's one issue. My personal take on resolutions is that they're put out by a committee. Most of the people in the room haven't studied these issues deeply and tend to just vote for them. And they don't have a governing effect. So my philosophy on these is sort of like, hey, save your capital for more important fights and that sort of thing. If you quibble with a resolution, maybe you make it known, maybe you don't. But obviously these are not governing documents. Partly we know that because the messengers passed a strong abolitionist resolution in Nashville in 21, and then the ERLC turned around and did something that was like flatly contradictory of that resolution the next year. So, my view is, these resolutions, they don't have a lot of impact. There's much more important debates to be had, and just generally speaking. You're not going to have a lot of traction trying to overturn these things. But what's your take on the resolutions, William?
Yeah, I think on the resolutions, Megan Basham made a really good point in my interview with her that Southern Baptists just need to be aware of how they're being used. So take, for example, a resolution that we recently passed about the war in Ukraine. Nowhere in that resolution did we authorize the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission to advocate for war funding, for military funding, for U.S. government to fund, the procurement or the delivery of warfighting munitions, artillery, etc. And yet, when that bill was coming before the U.S. House of Representatives, brought forward by Speaker Johnson, in violation of what's known as the Hastert Rule, in which you're supposed to get at least a majority of your conference to support it, Brent Leatherwood and the ERLC, went full steam out on behalf of it, and they appealed to this general resolution about the war in Ukraine and how it's unjust and all that stuff to defend their actions, when they were not authorized by that resolution in any way to actually proactively advocate for American military funding for the war in Ukraine, again, opposed by the majority of the Republican conference, which I'm sure then means it's opposed by the majority of Southern Baptists as well. And so we need to realize that, again, it's kind of always the same actors, right? It's like a few guys and their friends who are in these institutional positions who are trying to get their particular resolutions across the finish line to advance this narrow agenda that probably isn't held by the vast majority of Southern Baptists, but it's wrapped up in pretty anodyne and innocuous sounding language. And so, yeah, you're rolling up to the Southern Baptist Convention as a pastor who's not been paying attention. And they're like, oh yeah, I don't support the war in Ukraine. Yeah, of course you don't. So you vote for that. Or it's like, yeah, I support religious liberty. Of course you do. So you vote for that. And then these bad actors in the SBC turn around and use those resolutions to advance and argue for things that you would never support. So I think more Southern Baptists need to be in tune to that reality with whatever resolution is in front of us. I mean, also, I think we need to wrestle with the evangelical support for the war in Iraq and, whether that was truly the moral and right thing to do. I think in that October 7 resolution, we sort of appeal to the war in Iraq as a good example of, previous American foreign policy. I'm not so sure that it is, right? Like, I mean, these are questions that Southern Baptists need to wrestle with. So in terms of the resolutions, I think that there's a lot of self-dealing, very narrow, self-interested self-dealing that comes from the creations of the resolution. And on the religious liberty one, I would just like to point out just sort of how sort of silly it is to talk about threats to religious liberty in America and not talk about the left. The major threat, the only threat to religious liberty in America right now is coming from the progressive secular left, the Marxist left, the radicals, and particularly the LGBTQ agenda. It's not been Christian nationalists dragging Jack Phillips in and out of court for the last decade, destroying his life because he refused to bake obscene cakes and use his First Amendment freedom of speech to celebrate something that he doesn't support. That's been the radical homosexual activists, right? It's not been, Christian nationalists or Baptists with a particularly robust political theology that's been denying federal funding to Christian schools or withholding federal funding and demanding that they change their policies on human sexuality, right? That's been the progressive, bureaucratic, pro-homosexual activists, So it's very strange to me to see a resolution about religious liberty put forward in the Southern Baptist Convention in 2024 that fails to acknowledge the reality, the insurmountable reality of the fact that the major threat to religious liberty in America right now comes from the Biden regime, the Biden administration, the U.S. Department of Education. I mean, we're in Pride Month, for goodness sake, right? Just open your eyes and look at what the Department of Education, the Department of Defense, the Department of State is putting out on their Twitter handles right now. And ask yourself, is our real big threat to religious liberty coming from the Christian right today? Of course it isn't. So I think it's silly. And it's an example of what C.S. Lewis said, bring a fire extinguisher to a flood. But like you said, it'll probably pass. That's fine. I mean, I'm not going to bother me at all if it passes. I just think that why can't Baptists speak more honestly about the real threats to religious liberty in America today? And that it is only and exclusively and violently coming from the left. So I think it's lacking. Hopefully, maybe somebody will amend that resolution to make it clear. But the men who offered that, I don't know what world they're living in, but it's not the world that the rest of us are living in. It's not the world Jack Phillips is living in. It's not the world that the Tennessee pro-life protesters are living in, who are now being sent to jail. And one of the elderly women has potentially with health complications, she might die in jail, being mocked by her faith, by the judge, being mocked for her faith by the judge who's sentencing her. And then, these brave men in the SBC want to warn about threats to the religious liberty on the right. So there, you got a little extra rant from me on that one. But yeah, hey, I think, Josh, we've been going for a while here. What I'd like to do with the rest of the time is just sort of recommend some resources to people as they prepare for Indianapolis. What are some things that they should listen to, read, and then maybe just talk about our event one more time and sign us off.
Yeah, that sounds great. Obviously, go to the Center for Baptist Leadership.org. That is your one-stop shop. American Reformer is going to have some other staff out there from our journal. We like to cover major conservative denominational issues in our life together. So we're going to have some colleagues at the PCA's General Assembly. They'll be doing a podcast and writing. I think we'll have some article coverage on that in our journal. And then we're going to have some staff there. So Timon Klein, our friend, who's a Presbyterian, not a Baptist, but he will come to the SBC and comment on it, probably do some writing about it as an outsider, which is always interesting to hear an outsider's perspective. Obviously, you and I will be very active on social media during this time, and then the Baptist leaders, of course, on Twitter as well. In addition to that, this event is going to give a lot of equipping to people. There's going to be print resources at this event that people can take advantage of. I believe some of that's being prepared by us in partnership with Christ Overall, a fantastic organization. But those are the resources that come to mind, William. What else do we have?
Yeah. So as you're preparing to come to the annual meeting next year, we have, we'll have probably close to 40 articles up at Center for Baptist Leadership by the time we hit next week. We've got multiple articles on the law amendment from every angle, right? We have positive defenses of the law amendment. We have articles responding directly to arguments being made against the law amendment. So make sure to read those, really get equipped to understand what's going on with the law amendment. I'll mention a couple. One by Jason Gray, one of our contributing scholars. He wrote a taxonomy of bad arguments against the law amendment, is when he sort of breaks down all these various objections he's heard and responds to them. Jared Bell's article, 5 Reasons to Support the Law Amendment. We have multiple articles from Michael Clary doing some more of the theological defense of the law amendment. A wonderful article from Doug Ponder from Grimke Seminary. Pastors are elders, are overseers. He looks at the New Testament Greek and the exegetical case for why it's right to understand that, when we see pastor or elder or overseer anywhere in the New Testament, it's referring to the office and the function that goes with the office. You can't separate those two, as some are trying to claim. The Bible doesn't support that. Doug also has a great article on feminism in the SBC and how we have been infiltrated and subverted by increasing degrees of feminist thinking. And then also wanted to recommend Rhett Burns' articles on his financial transparency amendment. He's got 3 of those up on our website. He's done a podcast with us on that as well. So we've got articles there to equip you on the law amendment, to equip you on the financial transparency amendment, to really help you understand better what's going on in the Southern Baptist Convention in general. Continue to commend Jared Moore's argument on the queering of the SBC. That's an issue that's live and facing us. We might not have any specific votes on it this time around. And so make sure to read our articles. And then here's a couple podcast suggestions. As you're preparing to come to Indianapolis, make sure to listen to our first 2 episodes with John Whitehead on the story of Russell Moore's departure from the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Make sure to listen to our episode with Willie Rice, a man who ran for SBC president a few years back, and through that process realized that things in the SBC weren't exactly as he thought they were. Willie essentially says that after he got run over by the SBC bus, he looked up and he was surprised to find who was driving it. And now, a year later, Willie nominated Mike Stone as the next president of SBC in our previous one. And so Willie sort of is now joining with those of us who say, in Willie's words, we have a problem in the Southern Baptist Convention. What is that problem? Well, it's an infiltration of, unbiblical agendas that have come in through the abuse reform movement. It's the proliferation of things like critical race theory, an undermining of the sufficiency of Scripture, and really sort of this resistance to honest conversation and critique by many in institutional leadership. So listen to that Willie Rice podcast. And then also another podcast I would recommend is the one we just recently did with Megan Basham on her latest book. Very important information there about the Southern Baptist Convention. So that's plenty of listening material for your trip. One more article I'd mention is Stephen Feinstein's recent article on why he can no longer trust SBC leadership. This is a common theme that we've explored at Center for Baptist Leadership, and it's important because it's this broader context of all these debates going on in the Southern Baptist Convention that we don't have transparency and therefore we don't have trust in our leadership. Stephen is the type of guy who has been called the company man for defending and giving the benefit of the doubt to SBC leadership in the past. And he says he just can't do that anymore. I also recorded a podcast with him, which hopefully will be releasing maybe Monday. So make sure to give a listen to that. So come to Center for Baptist Leadership. Also, make sure to go directly to the SBC Amendment, the Law Amendment website and Twitter handle. They're at SBC Amendment on X. I can't remember the name of their website, but you can find it there in the Twitter handle and read and learn directly from Mike Law as to why his amendment is so important. Get smart, get ready, come and let's vote for a change, and let's vote for a better, more biblical direction in the Southern Baptist Convention. Oh, and finally, listen to our interviews with David Allen and Jared Moore, because those brothers have a great vision for the future of the SBC. We've got 2 podcasts, one with each of them, so you can hear directly from them why they're running to be the next president of the Southern Baptist Convention, what their vision is, what they support, what their platform is. And actually, we'll have a couple pieces coming out here from supporters of Jared and supporters of David, making the case of why people are voting for them and why you should too. So keep an eye out for those. Again, those are not an endorsement of either candidate, but it's a perspective that's important for other people to hear. And so more resources coming. And again, do join us on Tuesday. Make sure to register for that event. As it stands now, lunch seating is taken, but there's overflow and theater seating available. So unless you're listening to this and you are somebody who just feels so inclined to help support us and pull this off, and we can all of a sudden at the last minute provide lunch for a lot more people than we were expecting, lunch seating is taken. However, we have theater seating available. So, bring your own lunch, come sit in the theater seating and hear this wonderful material in this presentation. We hope to see you there.
Basically what I was hearing there was every resource on CBL's website is a must read or must listen before Indy. And I joke, but that's kind of true. I mean, your eye has been on the ball. Everything is directly relevant to the issues that matter. So I will reiterate to people, CBL is really a one-stop shop. If you haven't been very plugged in and you want to get caught up on the issues, you can't go wrong by going to CBL. And then, of course, as you mentioned, there's an amendment. There's an amendment-specific website that's run, I think, by Mike Law and friends called sbcamendment.org. That's got a lot of great information, too. Christ Overall has had some decent coverage and decent articles, some very good ones, actually. And so they've been a good resource as well. And I'll just reiterate the final thing you said there. CBL is supported by American Reformer. We're a young organization. CBL is an even younger organization, and we started planning what we thought would be a relatively modest event, and it's just blown up. And we're deeply grateful for that. We're really excited. But as part of that, we're making decisions like over the weekend about how many people can get lunch, and how big the screen should be on the stage for people that are in the room. Lots of little things that maybe older organizations know and can plan perfectly well. But we're making our way. We're figuring this out, and frankly, if anybody is so moved, a gift made in the next couple days enables us to go back and provide more lunches, or get the better AV set up. And so this is a high impact time to give if you want to. Just so we're feeding people, and every lunch and every head has a certain cost for us. So please do prayerfully consider, if you're so inclined, supporting our work. You can do that by going to AmericanReformer.org and making a gift that's designated to the Center for Baptist Leadership. And if you do that designation, all of the funds will be earmarked for CBL's work. But William, thank you so much for your efforts. I'm just going to brag on you for a minute. People may not realize this, but you have, they probably can tell, you've been burning the midnight oil. You have been cranking to get messengers equipped in this lead up to this convention. Thank you for your efforts, brother. I know you're looking forward to a little bit of a break after this convention's over, so I hope you get it. But this has been it's been a wonderful conversation. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And yeah, man, I believe in it. I love the Southern Baptist Convention, man. I want to see it do well. I want to see it thrive. I want to see I want to see it be a gospel powerhouse. I became a Christian through meeting a Southern Baptist pastor, was baptized in a Southern Baptist church, married in a Southern Baptist church. I'm a graduate of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. I'm a member of a Southern Baptist church today. Looking forward to being a messenger at the convention here this year. And I mean, the Southern Baptist Convention has and does so much good for the sake of the gospel and for the sake of our communities. It's worth fighting for. We live in a great age of institutional collapse and subversion, and our enemies, the enemies of the gospel, the enemies of the cross of Christ, they're not hiding their agenda to subvert and infiltrate and destroy faithful Christian institutions, organizations, and bright gospel witnesses in this world. It's unfortunate, but the truth is that they've been very successful with the other mainline Protestant denominations. And I think rightly understood, the Southern Baptist Convention is the last faithful mainline Protestant denomination in America. It's not without its faults and flaws, and we should have honest conversations about addressing those, about raising up a new generation of leadership in the Southern Baptist Convention who are going to stand on God's word against the world and not compromise with the world against God's word. That's my heart. That's my desire. That's my mission for the Center for Baptist Leadership. If you're so inclined to partner with us in that mission, we'd love to have you. We want to serve your church. We want to serve your members. I've had so many conversations and phone calls with random Southern Baptist lay members, Southern Baptist pastors, trying to help them, get involved in this fight. Because really, like you said, Josh, it comes down to sort of helping awaken the average Southern Baptist church to realize that the Southern Baptist Convention is something that they need to take responsibility for. They need to participate in. They need to make the trip. I know it's probably baked at this point, but I will say it's not too late to come to Indianapolis. If you're a Southern Baptist, make the last minute drive. Actually, if you need housing, we still have a couple beds left in an Airbnb that we have. So if you need housing at the SBC for any reason, please reach out to me. But also please be in prayer for us, for Center for Baptist Leadership, for all the other people who are involved in this effort. And in terms of who's worked the hardest, we just have to say Mike Law Jr. is a hero. That man has put his life on the line for the sake of doctrinal fidelity in the Southern Baptist Convention. It's not something he wanted. It's not something he went looking for, but the Lord has raised him up for such a time as this to lead the way on defending the scriptural qualifications for pastors in the Southern Baptist Convention. That man, I'm sure, is looking forward to a break after we get through Indianapolis. And so if you're listening to this, don't let Mike down. Come to the SBC, pass that amendment. If you see Mike walking around the Southern Baptist Convention, thank him for his labors, for his work. That man is a model. We think about the failures of many in leadership in the Southern Baptist Convention. Let's look at positively at a model of leadership, and that would be the faithful local church pastor of Arlington Baptist Church, Mike Law Jr. That man is a hero in many ways. I know he probably wouldn't want anyone to say that, but he's done fantastic work here. And Lord willing, we will see it come to fruition in just a few short days.
Amen. I can't let that go. I've got to echo you. Mike Law has been working every day for 2 years, and it's a completely thankless task. Most of the powerful people in the SBC hate his guts now. A lot of that work is late night, early morning, emailing people, calling them. And always he's a lot more sanctified than I am. He keeps his cool. He takes a lot of bullets and he just keeps his cool. Always got a smile on his face, humbly, making the case from Scripture for why we need to pass this amendment. It's. I'm going to give him a big bear hug when I see him and thank him. But not inviting everybody to do that necessarily. But he is a hero, and if Mike can do that for 2 years, you can jump in your car and drive a couple hours, or jump on a plane and fly a couple hours and come to Indianapolis.
Yeah, that's well said, Josh. Well, I think that's about everything we need to cover. We've been going for an hour 45 here. We'll love it when we get on and talk. Folks, thanks for joining. us here on a Center for Baptist Leadership live stream on X and YouTube. We've got a pretty great audience on X, so I thank you for that. But go subscribe to our YouTube. That's not exactly my forte in terms of how to grow, engagement on YouTube, but you could go like and subscribe to our podcast on there. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter at centerforbaptistleadership.org. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us here on X. Read our articles. Share them. I've had people ask me, how can I help you with the Center for Baptist Leadership? Well, here's a practical way. Recommend us to your fellow pastors, to your fellow Southern Baptist members and friends. Share our resources with your local association list. Have people sign up. As Josh said, consider supporting us. And then one other question I've got is, what are you guys doing to help equip people for Indianapolis? Well, we've covered a lot of this here. We covered a lot of it on a Twitter space last night. I've recommended resources as well. And then just make sure you follow us. We'll try to be quick with the trigger, hopefully not too quick on social media with, updating messengers as to what's happening with the convention, being prepared to be there in the room to vote. So make sure you follow us. That's one of the best ways that you can be prepared. That's a service we're trying to provide. I'm not trying to build a platform or anything like that. I'm trying to get good information to you, Southern Baptist pastor, Southern Baptist messenger. So thank you for joining us in that work. Josh, thanks for joining me on this live stream today. Thank you for your work and support on the other side of things here with American Reformer. And I'll see you in Indianapolis in just a couple days.
I'm looking forward to it, brother. Looking forward to seeing you and our many friends up there. It's going to be a really good time to labor together with all of you.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining in. And with that, we will sign off.
The Center for Baptist Leadership podcast is powered by American Reformer, hosted by William Wolfe, with audio production by Jared Cummings. Our music is a custom remix of Soldiers of Christ in Truth Arrayed, the official hymn of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. To help CBL reform and revitalize Christian institutions, please consider making a generous donation today at centerforbaptistleadership.org.